chat. But I read a book called Stray. It's this book here, this little tiny book. This is by Molly Mendoza. It's published by Bulgilhan Press. I think I'm saying that wrong. Let me double check inside this book. Bulgilhan Press. It's published in 2022. It's like a 52-page story that's like a super indie, super moody book about like heartbreak and not loving or loving yourself and others. I don't really know how to put a finger on describing this book because it isn't as much about finding love as it is about not letting people love you. Like, this book is a weird mix of characters who, particularly one character who is trying to get over heartbreak by finding another person and not letting that other person actually love them or let them in. But at the same time, the book ends in this nebulous, is that all relationships in the end? Like, we all have to deal with how we grapple with the ideas of like former heartbreak and former trust issues and all this other stuff. And I mean, it's a really, I don't know, a lot of other prose books and a lot of other comic books, I think, take hundreds and hundreds of pages to try to get you to these same thoughts that this book was able to manage in just 52, which I find to be really impressive. And I think that is a compliment not only to Mendoza's ability to write characters that have a lot of distinct voices. Like, there's 3 characters that kind of float through this story in a very strange way, because their art is like, it's extremely emotive. And I'm sorry if you're listening to this episode, but you should have been here live with us on Twitch. Some of the art in this book is just like, it's gorgeous. It depicts so much just with like the color work. And there's like this really beautiful mix of metaphor and reality where you kind of start to question what is real, what isn't. And she constantly abruptly brings you back to the present to try to like reestablish reality, and then it starts to blend again with fantasy. And I say fantasy not so much as like swords and elves and all this other stuff, so much as this surreal reality that our main character kind of lives in. And not really a lot of people are named in this book, so I'm sorry if I'm kind of skirting around details here, but the book is called Stray, and it is about the person who our main character ends up meeting named Stray. And there's this kind of question of like, were they in love with this person, or was it just a cat, or was it like something else? I really, really had to sit with this book after I finished it because I had to process a lot. And again, for a book that's only 52 pages long, it's very impressive to be able to deliver such like a strong story in such a small amount of time. So if you're looking for something that's really off the beaten path, very indie, very moody, highly recommend Stray. But it is a book that is heavy as hell. Like, I think there's a lot of heavy everything into this book, and I can't really throw like a content warning about a specific thing, but it is like an emotionally heavy book, and I love that. I really, really love that when books are able to do that. So Stray by Molly Mendoza.
Seems like a pretty small book to me.
Yeah,
I don't know how heavy it can be.
Listen, I will punch you through the internet right now. Don't you dare.
Danny with the dad jokes.
I did have a quick question, Mike.
Yeah.
Speaking of the size of the book, for your reading experience, is it weird like reading a book that's a different size? Because the reason I read most of my stuff digitally is because as a glasses wearer, it's just a lot easier to like read digital screens.
I feel you.
Where you can kind of zoom in and out and stuff.
Sure.
But how is it reading even? This book is even smaller than regular size comic.
Yeah, I mean it's a little bit bigger than like your traditional manga volume, I think. Yeah. I don't know. I think what's really interesting about books like this, and I think about interesting about comics in general, is like the size of the format can really kind of influence how you feel about the book sometimes. Like, I think manga has this perfect handhold size. I think there's something about the reason manga volumes are the way that they are is for like pocketability and carryability and all this other stuff. But indie books like this is like, it's got a very hard like spine, so it's kind of hard to like hold open. If you notice, like the binding is very tight. And I don't know, I feel like that influences me in like a positive way because it gives me a vibe for the book before I even dig into it. Because I, especially when it comes to indie publishers, a lot of the times, they're very meticulously picking the types of paper and stock and cover grade and all this other stuff because they want the book to feel a certain way. Like, I can pull up 2 other books that I have at home from the same publisher, like Faster by Jesse Lonergan is like this paperback, almost zine style book. And I think he did that intentionally. He wanted it to feel fast and loose because the book is literally about people driving fast and going crazy because they're on like this fantasy F1 racing track, right? So the feeling and size of this book is intentional. I think reading it digitally, you kind of lose a little bit of that. Now, this is not me saying you got to go physical or nothing else, because I disagree with that wholeheartedly. But I do really appreciate like the care that went into how this book feels. Because that is very, very important. And I think a lot of creators who are publishing and self-publishing or publishing through smaller publishers do that intentionally. And we get that sometimes at Indie or Image and Boom and so on and so forth, where we get like special paper stock, like the Enfield Gang Massacre, for instance, where it's got that paper stock that is intentionally meant to like wash out all of Phillips's colors, which is crazy to me because that book looks totally different digitally than it does in paper. And I'm glad that I own both for that reason. So anyways, long story short, it influences me in a good way. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you'll be able to carry Watchmen in your pocket when DC puts out those little manga sized collections. So you can have it all.